Time to talk movies, and this week we've got a musical theme going on. The penny starts to drop. Love and Mercy, the Brian Wilson biopic, is in cinemas next week. It recounts the troubled life and mind of the Beach Boys lead singer. Does it hit all the right notes? I didn't write it, I just read it. Movie reviewer Steve Newell has seen it and joins me now. Steve, good to have you along. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about Jurassic World. We knew it was going to be huge and that it was reviewer-proof, but did we see it being the biggest first week globally of any movie ever?
I'm a little bit surprised, actually. I mean, people are really excited about a new Jurassic film. Obviously, the first film's beloved by millions and millions of people, but it seemed like
the second and the third went off the boil.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is definitely the best sequel of the bunch. It doesn't really hold a candle to the first one. But, I don't know, some of the feedback from people that I know that aren't so movie reviewer-ish hasn't been super positive. So, in a way, it's kind of surprising that it's gone on to do such big numbers.
You know what surprises me sometimes, and this isn't really about Jurassic World, it's just one of the movies that fits into this. Sometimes a movie gets a vibe. And, the interesting thing about Jurassic World, obviously it's got things that make it a huge movie, but it's the fourth in line. Number 2, number 3 were actually not good movies at all, and yet it was pretty obvious it was going to be big because everyone was talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is really enjoyable. It's way better than the other 2 sequels, but it's definitely not in that same category as some other films we've seen this year, which get really good word of mouth, which helps. We'll come to the box office later on, but that word of mouth helps keep them in the charts for a longer time and keeps, send your friends along to see it. You might go back and see it again.
Absolutely.
Probably won't happen with this film so much.
No, and because those movies are a slower burn. All right, let's talk about the new release, and this is so new, it's actually not out until next week. Love and Mercy, it's a Brian Wilson biopic. Brian Wilson was as mad as a tack, wasn't he?
Basically, not at first.
Barking mad.
Not at first, barking mad. He got some dogs into the studio at one point, so yeah, it was pretty barking mad. It's an interesting film. Normally these biopics about a kind of guy having a slide from grace in some fashion are pretty predictable.
Yeah.
They might have a bookend of seeing him in the present day and then sort of recount chronologically the guy's life. This one's a bit different. They've got 2 different great actors playing Brian Wilson. So you've got a young Brian Wilson played by Paul Dano. He's playing him just as they go from...
Who is he? Is that a name I should recognise?
He's sort of on the up. He hasn't really quite had his breakout film yet. I don't think this may be the one that he starts getting talked about for potentially an Oscar, I think. But he's playing Brian Wilson just at the time he starts getting a bit chunky, leaves the Beach Boys to go on the road while he stays at home and makes pet sounds. And for those that don't know the record, I mean, it's one of the most ambitious albums of all time. It's the album that the Beatles were trying to emulate when they made Sgt. Pepper's, and they feel they failed to match it. So that's kind of the league that he's in. The older Brian Wilson's played by John Cusack, and the film joins him at a time when he's living in a house owned by his psychiatrist. His psychiatrist's his legal guardian. He can't do anything without his say-so, and he's just a giant wreck who's heavily medicated.
How truthful is this? Because the whole psychiatrist yarn is fascinating, and you could have made a movie just about that part of his life, couldn't you?
I think so, but it's really important that he's quite a shell at that stage, so to see him at his creative peak as the mental illness starts to really kick in, seeing those 2 versions of the character together and not played by the same person with bad aging makeup is really important. So for those that are into the Brian Wilson story and know about it, like I do, and the people that I saw it with, we really enjoyed it. For people that don't know anything about it, I think the actual steps that happen are pretty fascinating as well.
All right, so this is your recommendation, Love and Mercy, when it comes out next week. We should go and see it.
Yes, I think so.
All right, now in terms of your pick of the week, what have you got for us?
We stayed on the music theme this week, and it's another bit of a music bum out, actually. Gimme Shelter. It's a 1970 concert documentary about the Rolling Stones. They'd been on this tour in the States in 1969, and, the 60s were ending. No one really quite realised it was going to come crashing down and be a massive bum out yet, but that's kind of what was on the cards.
And the funny thing about this was, if people know this yarn, the music was actually fundamentally still great, but other things were going wrong, weren't they?
Yeah, totally. The optimism of the 60s and the people that everyone was the people that bands were hanging out with started to really be a bad idea. The drugs they're taking were a bad idea. So what happened was, at the end of their tour, they put on a free show at a speedway at Altamont. They got 300,000 people along. The bummer was that they got the Hells Angels to do security. Maybe not a good idea.
Why? Can they not be trusted?
Maybe not. Maybe they turned up armed with pool cues and started beating people up.
People were actually killed.
There was an audience member stabbed to death, and that footage is played to Mick Jagger in the editing booth and he gets him to run the film back, and there's footage of him just watching this guy getting killed in slow motion.
So there's a considerable amount of real documentary, real footage.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It doesn't really tell a story full of interviews. It's got
Where do you
great
get
live
that from?
performances.
It's called Gimme Shelter. Where can we get that?
You can pick that up any retailer.
Right. Okay. They're everywhere.
It's a fascinating watch with really good musical performances, and then the actual capture of when things start to go wrong. It's pretty scary.
I love it. It's a gem. All right, Steve. Top 5 this week. Let's have a look. Obviously, Jurassic World is at number 1.
Yeah, no surprises there. And the reason we're not talking about a new release this week is that people are going to keep going to see Jurassic World this week as well.
Yeah. So we know all of those. San Andreas, pretty average. Mad Max is still there. Now, just very quickly, one line on Noble, because I don't know anything about that.
Noble's one of those films that typically, I guess, it's a surprise to see it in the top 5 in a way.
Yep.
It's a true life story about a human rights campaigner, very like art house, mum and dad type fare.
And it's been around for a few weeks, and it's gradually creeping up there.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about it is that normally films will sort of drop off, losing about half their audience each week. Noble has lost 0.2% of its audience this week, so it's getting good word of mouth from its older art house set.
Brilliant. Steve, thank you very much for joining us. Steve Newell, Flicks editor, coming up.